two intro kale. This is a
noneho
Monday.
bakarango kasimba.
This is a Monday. Two now.
All right, you're welcome on Blackwood Fire Network. Africa Maria from Kampala, Uganda, with my colleague
INNOSETU
here on Blackwood Fire Network.
network.
On Facebook, Blackwood Fire Network Radio, YouTube, Blackwood Fire Network Live,
Yeah.
Twitter, Black Hot
Network.
Network. And yes, thank you so much. It's of course 18 minutes past 8 p.m. here in Kampala. We are outside. Yeah. So today it's not raining, right?
Mm.
But yeah, today's topic, of course, is about Africa. It's the origin of civilization.
But
And
before we go far, before you go into that topic, I would like to take this pleasure
mm,
to Keith.
mm,
I would like to thank her. To thank him. Sorry.
it's okay.
Yeah, to thank him for his support towards my birthday. It was there last week.
Yo.
Yeah. Thank you, Keith. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for whatever.
Back
Thank
to
you.
you. So
Thank you.
I will also thank him on your behalf.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was
anyway,
so glad. I was so
yeah.
happy. Yeah.
Yeah, but we haven't bought a cake yet, but I guess we shall.
Mm.
But thank you, of course. Thank you so much for celebrating Setu's birthday.
Mm.
Today he received some dollars and I guess he's extra excited. And I'm excited with him.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much, Keith, for that kind heart. Not everyone.
Mm.
Is that a rain? Not everyone can do that. So thank you so much for always, um, remembering, celebrate us, and of course, being part of our
Mm.
existence and celebrations.
I can use it.
Africa's civilization is characterized by diverse tapestry of cultures and histories across continents.
Mm.
And ancient Egypt, with its pyramid and hieroglyphs, represents one fact. And West Africa's empires like Ghana, Mali, and Songhai were centers of trade and learning. Great Zimbabwe in the south reflects advanced stone construction. Ethiopia's Kush kingdom was an early Christian civilization, of course, at that time. Um, um, they used to say that it was Christianity, but we see that Kush,
Mm.
Ethiopia's Aksum was a source of African religion, practice, and writings.
Mm.
And of course, these examples underscore the richness and complexity of Africa's civilization, dispelling stereotypes and emphasizing the continent's vital role in human history. What about that return? So, but usually when we are trying to look for Africa's history all over, different works from different scholars, you will understand that there is limited, in fact, there is limited data concerning the civilization of Africa because it is very important that people are kept in that dark
Mm.
and not to know because first of all throughout history Africa has always been recognized as underdeveloped and uncivilized.
Mm.
It has been categorized with the bad things throughout history. So that's why it is very important that the facts about Africa's civilization are always hidden, and many people do not really know what happened uh, during history and what Africa stands for in regards of civilization. It was in Africa that we saw a very unified social and communities. Where it's in Africa where we saw leadership being set It is in Africa where we saw education. It is in Africa where we saw trade. It is in Africa where we saw communal work. Now, throughout history, though someone may look at our communal kind of system as something that is not civilized, but having a society which is arranged according to individuals and their responsibilities, and also identifying each society and their role, we have what we call clans. We have what we call we have, of course, clans and their responsibilities. So Africa was structured in a what I would call a government now.
Mm.
That we had leaders, we had the subordinates, we had those who followed leaders, we had the usual people.
Mm.
Um, what else did the people want to call civilization? And of course, though the characters of Africans were always categorized with the civilization, more especially coming from the Western world or the people outside Africa. But they imitated a lot from Africa, and they, of course, carried this because they saw this was very important, and they transferred it to wherever they were. And unfortunately, they left us things that do not, have a huge impact. Things that we have kept on copying, imitating, trying to be, that actually has also contributed to a lot of things that are actually happening to us now. We are losing our identity, our names. We are losing what we called command, because throughout history, Africans were known for their strong command of action, command of apparently everything. And that's why I remember when you read some books, they'll tell you that African people were so barbaric. They were not barbaric. They were people who stood on their grounds, and whatever they said, they meant it.
Mm.
You understand? So, someone who stands on their ground and means what they are saying, at times people find such kind of people so rude.
Mm.
But these are people probably who know what they stand for. And yeah, but anyway, before I just keep on, Innocent, you gotta tell us something.
So, civilization, very many Africans won't believe you that civilization started from Africa.
Mm,
However, it is just an open secret that Africa was the cradle of humankind and
mm,
civilization. It is just a hidden secret. Not very many Africans know about this.
mm,
That's, of course, civilization started from Africa. Mankind, the origin, the genesis of the entire thing, it was
mm,
from Africa. However, before civilization, men lived in a state of nature with no rules or development witness to that the developments that we see today. Before development and civilization, African continent had a different environment with different weather patterns. However, some areas were dry and surrounded by deserts, while
mm,
other areas were rainy, fertile, and productive, just as it is now. So, some African living in dry areas migrated in such productive areas where they established new forms of government and advanced societies. Those who remained in deserts and forests had to look for new ways to survive. So,
mm,
therefore, they started new means of production and trade. In this way, the African civilization emerged, and in this lesson, we'll focus on actually three. We are going to focus on three African countries, on three African civilizations: Egypt, the kingdom of the Kush, and kingdom of the Zoo.
mm,
Hmm? So, I don't mean this zoo, Zoom. I mean zoo. So we see that Africa being having different weather patterns, different climates in Africa.
mm,
This over time gave Africans, of course, a way of how to survive this kind of situation, the climate, the weather conditions,
mm,
where the forest, because we see that people have not started migrating from one place to another. You know, the state of life we lived before the Wazungus, we
mm,
lived in a free society. where you're free to move everywhere you want and no one will ask you. No one will
mm,
ask you the documents about where you're going. No one is going to tell you that you need a passport to go in this land. So people before colonialism, I'll call it that,
mm,
before the seeing of Bazungus in Africa, we had no demarcations in Africa. People were
mm,
free to move because, of course, were dispersed. There are people that lived in forests because forests were there before. There are
mm,
people that lived near the coast.
mhm,
Hmm? The
mm,
people who survived, who lived along the coast.
mm,
Hmm?
mm,
The people who lived in deserts. But
mm,
these people, not like movement has not started today, migration has not started today. These
mhm,
people move to different areas. But wherever people go into different areas during those days,
mm,
they always looked to a new way of surviving, a new way of getting food, a new way of shelter, a new way of survive all kinds of surviving you have ever known. Eating, drinking, sleeping. Kitegeera?
mm,
So that new way of survival, that creation of new of survival,
mm,
that is the civilization we talk about.
mm,
And we did not copy this kind of civilization from the whites.
mm,
Civilization started from here because, of course, it is an open secret that Africa was the cradle of humankind and
mm,
civilization. We see that the first African civilization was in Egypt. So Egypt was the first African country to experience civilization.
mm,
Is it true?
mm,
Buuza ggwe, oli
mm.
olumu wali okikuba. Oli olumu wali okikuba
Mm.
ng'okiwakanya. Mbu si
Egypt.
kituufu. Yeah. So
Wow.
Egypt is found
Lwaki
in the. We
wapayiriza?
know. Okay, go ahead. We see in Africa, and very many Africans will tell you African civilization started from West, civilization started from USA. I don't know where people get this history. I don't know where Africans get this. So we see that Egypt was the first African country to experience civilization.
Mm,
Egypt is found actually in the northeastern parts of Africa. We know that alongside the Great River Nile that starts from Uganda, I guess.
mm,
The River Nile provided the Egyptians with much needed water for farming. Kitegeera?
mm,
In the 10th millennium, the early Egyptians lived a nomadic life where they hunted and gathered food. The culture was later replaced by agricultural farming, where
mm.
grains were the main food source. So this should show this should show Africans.
Byonna byenfunye wano ebyogera ku Egypt.
So this should show very many Africans that the seeds we have in Africa, they're not from Europe. Kitegeera, eh?
Mm,
Eating did not come from Europe.
mm,
Farming did not come from Europe.
mm,
We did not learn farming from Europe, like very many Africans know.
mm,
We see that civilization, like in regard to Egypt as a first African country to be civilized, we see that they did farming before. It was there. Grains were the main source of food, and these things were there before the
mm,
coming of the Wazungu. So we see that the Neolithic society was established. Egyptians shifted from being hunters and gatherers, focused more on agriculture and permanent settlement.
mm,
When we talk about civilization, um, when you talk about civilization, someone will tell you that an ignorant person, someone who has not made thorough research, someone who doesn't have that sense of understanding about the word civilization,
mm,
we'll talk about cars, we'll talk about internet,
mm,
we'll talk about that modern life. Hmm?
mhm,
But Egypt is shifting from hunters and food gathering,
Mm, mm,
to agriculture and permanent settlement. That is civilization.
mm,
Which eh,
mm,
that is civilization in a real sense,
mm,
because it wasn't done before. People, like I said before, that these people were nomadics. They moved from place to place. Now they develop a new idea of agriculture and permanent settlements.
mm,
Which together,
mm,
and they established new forms of leadership, complex societies, and professional labors. With time, Egyptians continued to develop more complicated cultures, which eventually led to development and innovation of writing very many years, like a thousand, not even a thousand, like 30,000 years ago. Hmm? They brought in new developments, innovations and development in writing, even see writing
mm,
together.
mm,
So the upper and lower Egypt were united by king by king, and formed one united first kingdom in Egypt.
mm,
Through the leadership of that king, he was called Menes, the first king from, of course, from during those years. This experienced massive civilization and construction of the pyramids. We
mm,
see construction of the pyramids. So this period of civilization was called the Old Kingdom, and it was also the period when Egyptian kings adopted the title of Pharaoh. How's that?
mm,
How's that in English? Pharaoh. Isn't it the Ugandan native language?
Kabaka.
Pharaoh.
Kabaka is a Pharaoh is a title.
It is your title.
Mm.
So, osobola okwongerako nga sinaba okweyongerayo.
Um, you've talked about the people in Egypt letting go other things and concentrating on, of course, agriculture. And we know the Nile River that stretches from the Eastern Africa, running from south to north Egypt, of course, contributed a lot because ancient Egypt was divided into two regions, the Upper Egypt and the Lower Egypt. The most important thing they now provided to the ancient Egyptians was the fertile land. Now, if you look at this, civilization mm, um, there is a lot that of course, is involved in this kind of system. But anyway, they now provided ancient Egyptians with fertile land because we know most of the Egypt land is desert. Okay, but along the Nile River, the soil is rich and good for growing crops. So it is along the river now that Egyptians get fertile soil. Now, the Nile River also provides a lot of building materials for the ancient Egyptians. They used the mud from the river banks to make stranded bricks. These bricks were used in building homes, walls, and other buildings. These people, they got this wall, they got the mud and stuff, and they build that mud. You know, we've seen a lot of African houses that are made from mud. So, yeah, they go and make mud, they make bricks, they smear the houses with the muds and stuff like that. So this was also seen in Egypt throughout history. And of course, the Egyptians also quarried limestone and sandstones from the hills along the side of the Nile. Now, since most of the major cities of ancient Egypt were built along the Nile River, so the river could be used like a major highway throughout the empire. Boats constantly traveled up and down the Nile carrying people and goods. If you see most of the the old cities.
Ojja ku makya wabula.
So since it's okay now.
Yeah.
Since most of the major cities of ancient Egypt were built
Eba evuga
along the
tru
Nile
tru
River.
tru. Gikube.
Stop.
Sooka gikube kuba zonna genda. Tolinako naye ayinaako. Tolinaako. 6-5.
Then,
Yeah.
not tell you.
Wagijjambula. Nakola mubedde kitegeeza bwe bagiteere.
Tebakwevuumuza.
Iyo nga sijja wadde nga wadde kapidde.
Ate kati gwambuzabuzizi. So anyway, um, so we say like now the Egyptians wrote, you know, they used to say, you know, we introduced reading and writing in Africa and stuff like that. But throughout history, we know that Africans used to write. The Egyptians wrote on papyruses or carved into stones. They used the three main kinds of writing. These people used to either carve the information on the stone or use papyrus, papyrus to write something. So you know papyrus.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I know.
So they used to use that. Here people do carve, do make papyrus for mats. They make mats out of papyrus. And so you would find when someone has decorated that mat with the papyrus and stuff like that. Oh my God, I don't know. So first of all, somewhat. So the Egyptians wrote on papyruses or carved, I know, and also carved, information into stones. But of course, they used the three main kinds of writing. They had the hieroglyphs, which was the oldest. Now, these were pictures describing or symbolizing certain meanings. Later, clusters of consonants. They would draw pictures, and I think you guys have. I think you guys have ever come across. I think you guys have ever come across such kind of thank you of images that are always written on ancient Egyptian writings. And Egyptian writings, at times I usually see most of them, like you see someone, a picture having a head like of a bird, an animal, and stuff like that. So this was called the hieroglyphs kind of writing. They also had a hieratic writing. Now this was used mostly by priests in religious texts, and they also had a demotic writing, which was the simplest and most widely spread. It was used for administration, tax records, and everyday life. Egypt writing was uh, discovered by French archaeologists and a lot of people at that time who were so amazed of how come this book can write. So can someone take information and also write it down? But later on, you know what they told us in school, that these people are the ones who taught us how to read All right.
mm, mm,
Now, usually when we talk about Egypt, we cannot skip what they call the pyramids,
mm,
because the moment you talk about Egypt, most of the people think about pyramids. But the pyramids were built as burial places and
mm,
monuments to the pharaohs. Now, as part of their religion, the Egyptians believed that the pharaoh needed certain things to succeed in the afterlife. Deep inside the pyramid, the pharaoh would be buried with all sorts of items and treasure that he may need to survive in the afterlife.
mm,
So the pharaohs, apparently, the Egyptians believe in afterlife. So that's why they built this pyramid as burial places or monuments to Pharaoh. Some of the earlier pyramids, called the step pyramids, have large ledges, and we know that some people will look at these.
okay.
Some people will look at these pyramids and not differentiate and not even understand. But these pyramids are in types, and they have been constructed in different stages. There are those first. Gakawaka kalungi ako. Those were the first. Mukwano olina ayogera ebyebisooto tutabule. So, so most people will not. Most of the people usually know about the pyramids that have more sloping and flat sides. But these are were the latest. Actually, I should say they are the latest now. This pyramid represent a mound that emerged at the beginning of time. The sun god stood on the mound and created the other gods and goddesses. So most of the people, when they look at these pyramids, they think it is the same, but pyramids were created differently to, of course, carry different messages. Now, when people usually, um, most people who tour Egypt always talk about the Great Pyramid of Giza. But well, the Great Pyramid of Giza is thought that the architect of the pyramid was Khufu's vizier. And there were three small pyramids next to the Great Pyramid built for Khufu's wives. It was. I remember there is a story that they used to tell us as we were growing up. That whenever Pharaoh would die, bamuzikanga ne mukazi we.
Bamutta waba nti akyali mulamu.
Bamuzika ne mukazi we.
Waba kyamulamu bamutta.
Eh? Omukazi we gwe yasinganga okwagala. Era you find kizibu ogenda when you check in the pyramid waliyo pyramids have chambers. So babaziikanga mu chamber. You become n'olaba n'omanya this is the queen's chamber. And chamber Pharaoh yogera.
Ozibu okukola ekiro.
N'emisana twebakanga. Ennaku zino waliwo ekitali kituufu. Munaye twebaka n'emisana. Ekyali no n'emisana tubadde twebaka. Kati tubadde tukoye bukoyi tukoowanga olumu.
All right. So, talking about civilization and Africa, of course, becoming the continent that is the origin of the civilization and mankind. We see that seven continents. We have seven continents in the world, not so. We see that seven continents, different cultures, color, race, language, but where did all these begin? We see that what does history actually science archae- archae- archaeology tell us, and why is Africa considered as the cradle of civilization?
Mm,
However much these people have tried to put a lot of propaganda on this,
mm,
however much they have blackmailed Africans, however, and no matter and no matter how much energy they have put into this,
mm,
and no matter how much money they have paid to the media
mm,
to paint Africans bad, to paint Africans as uncivilized, to paint Africans as backward, to paint a lot about Africans.
mm.
Still, the fact remains that Africa is considered as the cradle of civilization.
Ngatakutoka
So, first of all, it is no more fiction but a fact that humans originated from Africa
mm,
and later migration resulted into various races, cultures, and heritage.
mm,
Kademwako.
mm,
Hmm?
mm.
So, in the next few minutes, you will discover some key reasons why Africa is considered the cradle of human civilization. That is, come, how can I say this? So, the evidence is of the human origin. We see that
Mwagala kunsolo.
eh, fossil records,
Banakwogera ku
evidence
bisolo
shows
mugamba
that
mbesolo.
our hominin ancestors
Okyalo.
evolved in some parts of Africa roughly over like 7 million years ago. Hmm?
Mm, mm,
We see, and later, in just about thousands of 30,000 years ago, we see that the modern day human evolved from our hominin ancestors, and this has proved this has proven to have occurred in Africa. Further, DNA and fossils analysis show that climatic conditions and tracking of the migratory herds amongst other reasons caused our African ancestors to migrate to Europe, Asia, and the Middle East.
mm,
Take it.
mm,
I talked about this Walinti in the first place.
mm.
Hmm? I say I said that um
Nzija
olaga
ndakunaaba ku maaso.
ataga amazzi
Mazzi gaffe gakunywa.
and our data so now the migration comes from big environmental change. Perhaps people left because of environmental changes, that were environmental environment that was changing and deteriorating. This is the thing that I talked about at the beginning of this show, that in Africa, we have forests, we have different climates and weather in Africa. We have different vegetation patterns in Africa. That during those days, how do we come to see the source of mankind? How do we come to call Africa the source of civilization and the origin of mankind? That Africa, there lived people, the ancestors, our ancestors in Africa. These are people that migrated to Europe, Middle East, and Asia, our ancestors from Africa. This has been proven. This has been proven, and very many Africans don't believe this. Very many Africans, they don't know about this because this history is not taught in schools. They will tell you about the old skull of human body, of humans to be found in Africa, but history does not talk much about this. They will tell you a lot that is not in context with this. So no matter why very many Africans, they are blind about this. So we shouldn't forget that if humans of all races, regions, and cultures originated from Africa, it is their need for all the tribal wars, racism, and discriminations. Kitegeera? So another proof that shows that, I don't know whether people know about this. I don't know whether this is taught in Europe, but in Africa, I've not seen. I've not seen it in African schools being taught. We see that the stone tools, the early days of human civilizations, these are things that have been found in Africa, that have been discovered in Africa. So scientific research have shown that even as far as 2.6 million years ago, the earlier humans who lived in Africa were using stone technologies. These were civilizations, total civilizations. Hmm?
Yeah.
That even before the coming of these modern knives we have, our ancestors used stones. That was civilization. This wasn't copied from the Wazungus. No Mzungu came here during that time
Mm.
and told this, but they're just copying from these developments, these civilizations that were made by our ancestors to renovate. I will call it renovating. Or to renovate what our ancestors did. Okitegeera? So today it is a computer and phone technology world, not so,
Mm.
but back then it was older, older one technology era. Simple stone tools and more flax chipped off. So in the early 1930s, we see that Ruiz Lucky, a Kenyan British, of course, pi- here,
Archaeologists.
archaeologists discovered the first old worn tools in Old Vai George in Africa. That is Africa. These tools are discovered in Africa. I know there are discoveries that are modern discoveries that have been made in European countries the first human, uh, about the first humankind and the civilization,
But this
but
is
we see the oldest old one tools that were used by our ancestors, by those humankind, by those people that lived before us, were found in Tanzania, and that is at Old Village. I
olwo
wish,
n'endala gye baazuula mu Ethiopia.
mm, I wish Mukama waffe atuwa that man and we can visit that area.
Uh-huh.
Kyagamba ki?
Which one?
Eh?
We can visit where?
Old Village.
Oh.
Yeah, we take some survey, we look at those stones, we show the world how those stones look like. We prove to the world that civilization did begin from Europe. Civilization was here in Africa. Africans were doing good before. Whichever. Tossing me what? Around good thing. Mhm.
Good thing there is a guy called Eddie who will give us 200 in a few days.
Few days ng'ataagawa ezo ssente.
Agitwale mbu agibeere nayo.
Few days ate 200. Does it make sense mazima? Wano we tutuuse ate essimu nga tagyogera. Anyway, yogera naye nze kankole. So since then, various discoveries have been made by the scientist community on how human civilization and use of technology began in parts of Africa. We see that most discoveries, we are seeing them in Africa. Most of the discoveries have been made in Africa. I've not heard of any European countries about these old civilizations in Africa. So no wonder Africa is considered the cradle of human civilization. Kitegeera?
Mm.
So we also see stories through sculptures and arts of those people that lived some time back. Today we see cameras, we see iPhones, we see Samsung, we see Nokia today. But these people that lived before us, these first people that lived before us used now lived showed used stories through sculptures and arts. Toseka. Oba oyagala kwebaka genda weebake.
Ngenda.
Genda weebaka oyagala kwebaka. Genda oba oyagala kwebaka. Oba oyagala kwebaka genda. Kirabika ndi dictator. Another important reason why Africa is the cradle of civilization is the richness of ancient stories expressed through sculptures and arts. The late Kofi Annan, actually the former United Nations Secretary, um, expressed this that Africa's rock art is the common heritage of all Africans, and it is more than that. It is the common heritage of humanity. Okitegeera? Ono yakitegeera.
Mm,
Okitegeera?
mm. Tulaba pan-Africanism.
Okitegeera?
Olaba pan-African information w'ogijja otegeera naba logo yaabwe.
Uganda Heritage and Museum. Okitegeera? So he expressed this and said that as populations increase and vandalism, eh, and the theft of Africa's rock art are on the rise. You know, there was Zungus that are stealing all these things so that we forget about this history, about civilization and humankind. We forget these people are taking them to their countries so that we believe that they originated from their countries,
Mm,
which doesn't give sense in vain. Hmm?
mm,
So um, we see that it is more than the guy said. So this irrepressible resource is highly threatened. It's it is time for African readers to take a new and more active role. We must save this cultural heritage before it is too late. Watch it again.
mm,
So extraordinary rock art sculptures and terracotta found in parts of Africa, which date back to millions of years, is evidence that Africa is the cradle of civilization. Kitegeera?
mm,
Um, we have the culture called the Nok culture, one of the earliest known societies in Nigeria, is noted for extraordinary terracotta, which date back to, of course, like 20 million years ago. You will be amused actually to some of the complexity and a bit of some terracotta and iron sculptures that were made in such olden era.
mm,
You can't even believe that these things were made during those days.
mm,
Hmm?
mm.
Okitegeera? So this is the
Kirabika.
civilization we talk about. We don't talk about the cars. We don't talk about the phones we see here. We talk about these kind of civilizations that Africans made without their help, without the knowledge of the Bazungus,
Mm,
that put it point blank. The civilization started from their lands. Okitegeera? Furthermore, the wisdom of Khufu, builder of Great Pyramid of Giza, you talked about.
mm,
Hmm?
mm,
So this guy showed that how did the king build a pyramid of that was of about 138 meters tall, the equivalent of 40-story building in the year of over like 20 million years ago. The Great Pyramid of Giza is one of the most extraordinary buildings history has ever recorded. Imagine, we talk about skyscrapers.
mm.
Kozi kati ekizimbe ekipya ekisinga obulamu mu kibuga Dubai.
Bwe bagamba
Okitegeera?
mufaazi. Mm,
I talk about this pyramid during those eras where there were no babiyita batya? Are they drones? Are they how do they call those things?
drone.
Bwe bakozesa
Gundi
okupuulinga waggulu.
bukite.
No, bubeerako pivot bikyani mechanical biki. Bubeerako obujegere babuteekako kupuulinga like to push things. kubanga lift, but
Leave.
yeah, but they use them in building, in construction to take materials up.
Erinnya lyako lijja naye ligenda.
So those things weren't built in those days, but we see that building of over 138 um, meter tall pyramid is built. It is
Mm,
not easy.
mm,
So the Great Pyramid of Giza is one of the most extraordinary buildings history has ever recorded. It was built in Egypt by Pharaoh Khufu and still stands strong, tall and amazing
mm.
even after thousands of
Ekisinga
years
era
ago.
kalifa nga bwe nagambye.
Okay.
One of the tallest
Yeah.
buildings.
So if leaders in Africa could do such wonders in such an olden era, it is no surprise that here it is no surprise that we can make this today. However, we don't utilize what we have in Africa. We don't utilize our what our ancestors did for us because the Bazungu propaganda is too much during these days. Kitegeera? They dictate everything during these days because, of course, by the time these people built, these olden leaders built these pyramids in Egypt,
Mm,
we see that lands were not demarcated by these people, the
mm,
Bazungus. We had no colonialism by then, but these people were able to build such, to make such developments, to make such civilizations across Africa and the entire world. Okitegeera? So I wish leaders today singa balabira ku bantu bano and they do such developments as related to different civilizations that we have today. But you find out that Africans can't think for themselves. Okitegeera?
nowadays.
They will call they will call Chinese to come and do construction, building of the UN AU headquarters. Okitegeera?
They don't know that they build things stronger than those houses.
So we know that Africa is a true land of greener pastures, right? And this is why uh, initiatives such as the Pan African Heritage bano nga beekulowoona. Era se banoonyeza bwe beeteeramu awo.
Anyway, Africa itself, you cannot talk about civilization and not talk about the take a no. You cannot talk about Africa's civilization and kati wangamba ekimu kisanvu yankoledde ki
Because again, I will pick it and bring it assured. The PC screen is on. Yabizeemu era bino.
Yeah. Oli anyamba kyomuzi message y'omunyambi message y'oli munaku wa message.
Did you find money? Mugambe nti. Yogera.
Anyway, so first of all, civilization. You can never civilization and civilization cannot work hand in hand. Civilization and barbarism cannot work hand in hand. But if you look at throughout history, even when you are studying in school, you will see that they used to say that the Asian or the Africans of those days were so barbaric, they are very hostile, they are very inhuman, they are very uncivilized. They usually categorize Africans with a lot of stuff
Mm.
that are so uncivilized. But if you look at who was really
Much.
uncivilized, muleke tumudamu muze oyo. Tumuleke bulesi mutunuulire muleke
Mm.
tumuleeta namudde. Tomuddamu please muleke oyo nyamuvu. Don't do it. If you look no muleke tomuddamu, just ignore. No, just ignore that thing. Reply nga muleke jako VPN bus. If you look at the history, like you were trying to tell us, that those are the facts. Those are the facts that show that Africa was civilized even before anybody else, or even before other people were. But why is it that when they came down here, they turned the cards, and they turned the cards to face them, and they took all the credit? First of all, in Africa, we had schools. We had schools in Mali, we had schools in Ethiopia, we had schools, we had colleges, we had universities in Africa. We had, even if it wasn't all about, and even if other African places had what schools that we call homeschooling and stuff, but still we are receiving education. And these people picked that. We also used to write books. We used to write religious books that used to talk about religion, and they even copied from these things. All the stories they wrote came from that. So, but it is very important that Africans still remain ignorant about all this history, because it is only when you're ignorant that it is possible for these people to keep on controlling you. So, in Africa, if you look at if we talk about Egypt right now, we have gone even very far. I'm going to give an example that every African out there who is watching me here on Black Hot Fair Network is going to understand what I'm talking about. When we talk about Egypt, sometimes I'm like, okay, we're talking about Egypt. You don't feel the vibe. But civilization has been exercised on African society throughout time. Last time we were talking about the invasion of the surgery equipments, people giving cesareans birth, and these were in different kingdoms in Uganda, just Uganda. You understand? So we had a lot. We knew, first of all, we had the techniques. Batutidde balinda kulaba bikima nabwe yaliko amasa kijja kiyimirire wano.
Kisalawo mulundi
So, a society that is organized in
tuli bweru nnyo tuli eyo bbali wa jjumba oba mu lusuku.
abikula waneeno
balaba nkyusa bukyusi naafuga.
So if you look at like I was saying, tulina kubeerawo nga twebuzaabuza mwoyo munyampita omuzaako mukono. So if you look at there is no way uncivilized people will have leaders in different societies. Even if we do not
byakakuwa ssente tugyakuwa ssente weyayamu ssente twazikozeemu.
akazitwa ne tunnalya.
You say different leaders in different societies.
Yeah, and also we used to do our work communally. You see, everyone knew we had kings, we had the chiefs, we had we had the Barusura. I don't know how you call the Barusuras. That army, or the how should I say, the
Of the kingdom.
people that we used to
Of the king.
protect the kingdom.
Mm.
Okay, they were warriors, they were kingdom
Mm,
warriors
mm,
who used to protect their kingdom fight. They were born to do that. And each time each fight.
tokola kikyamu gundi eyo okwetoolerawo omusajja ola ogamba gagenze gajja we gagenda nkuba ekutte.
So so being arranged in a way that people knew what to do and who and each everyone's responsibility was a sign that Africans were civilized. Until we had people carry out different duties and responsibilities, which is not animals don't. Barbaric people are barbaric don't. But Africans exhibited a certain level of civilization. They introduced this kind of leadership or government that they call the democracy. Because we had a kind of leadership that was very strong, that until we let go this kind of kind of leadership, it would be very hard for them to conquer Africa, to conquer us. Now that's why you see that most of the people in the kingdoms at that time, they were taken into slavery. Others were killed and being replaced by the puppets. Um, Others were displaced. You understand? Because what the fuck? Yeah, yambudde nange nentya kiki ekimbaddeko mbadde njogera ki
Tebakuse.
ozikikiza mbadde njogera ki
Sijjukira.
kikiza
Yogera naawe.
ekijjukiza kye mbadde ngamba ntandikira okwo
Saate mawuge. Kyusa topiki. Yogera ku kadde.
akyusiza mukati atupaseewo bannange. No, kati olaba in history those people when the British came ebyo ebiseera we used to see the governor of so and so, the governor of so and so. But when those people came, they saw how strong our leadership was. They saw how strong the African governments were. And they knew unless they divide these people, like of course they use the divide and conquer rule, that unless they divide these people that want to look wagulu wendala, it's gonna be hard. So there is corrupt away leadership, kingship, monarchies, and they introduced what they call democracy. If at all we were uncivilized, if at all our own systems were not fair, why is that? Why is England still using that kind of system until now? If at all would they identify us as uncivilized people, uneducated, they identify us as barbaric and all that stuff. Why is it that England still uses a monarchy system to lead? Now this is because they knew how strong. And by the way, if you look at most of these governments, you realize that United Kingdom, and you realize that UK is one has one of the strongest leadership system. Check it out. It was one of, even if they have their parliament and stuff, we hardly see saga. Yet we know there is a lot that is going on, but they try so much to remain composed and um, you know, and keep a proper and upright image. What's that guy's name?
Yogera gwe gwasesaze.
I don't remember. What's that guy?
Yogera United Kingdom and yogera Ukraine.
Hmm?
Yogera.
Mazi.
Yogera.
Mazi.
Onyose.
Mazi.
Tukigale. Owaayi. Ono yogera ng'omuntu eyakubiddwa dda.
Jaira.
Okale yogera ku bino.
All right. Despite suffering through horrific systems of slavery, sharecropping, and the Jim Crow era, um, we all know that the early African Americans made countless contributions to science and technology. This lineage and culture of achievement emerged at least 40,000 years ago in Africa. Unfortunately, few of the people are aware of the accomplishments of history of Africa beyond ancient Egypt in seldom, of course, it's seldom uh, published. Now, the majority, sadly, the vast majority of discussions on the origins of science include only the Greeks, Romans, and other whites, but in fact, most of their discoveries came thousands of years after Africa development. The Jao. The Jao. So you can see that yes, when we look at development, someone will say, "Wow, who made the
By the way,
phone?"
for me, I hear about the Greeks, the Romans, but I've never seen Africa in any place when they talk about civilization. It's not given a place. All discussions rotate about the Greeks. Writing started from the Greeks, Romans. That's we have even the Roman numerals.
We even have the Greek methodology.
Yeah, so I'm not seeing like Africa anywhere. Like this is the African writings. This is the African writings. This is what all the discussions of discussions of civilization relate about the Greeks, Romans.
They don't talk about Africa neither today or yet. Of course, they discovered, the Greeks and the Romans discovered whatever they did years after Africa had developed. Now, while the remarkable black civilizations in Egypt remains, unknown, untalked about, there were sophistications and impressive invasions, of course, at that time throughout ancient Africa as well. And also, there are just a handful of scholars in the area who talk about, the Africa's civilizations. The most prolific is the late Ivan van Schaltimer, an associate professor of Rutgers University. This guy wrote and talked a lot about Africa's civilization. Of course, he called that the vibrations of Africa, geniuses. Guys, you can still look this guy up. Or you can still look for a book called The Vibration of African Geniuses too. He talks about Africa. He explains, because when you're trying to look for the fact for all these facts, the internet actually doesn't have like much of them, because of course there is a lot of you know there is a lot of blocks and brokerages. But yes, surely only we also know that you know we know that many modern high school level concepts in mathematics first were developed in Africa. As well, the first method of counting more than 3,000, 35,000 years ago. Egyptians scripted textbooks about math that included division and multiplications of fractions and geometry formulas to calculate the area and the volume of shapes. Distance and angles were calculated, algebraic equations were solved, and mathematically based predictions were made of the size of floods of the Nile. The ancient Egyptians considered the circle to have 360 degrees and estimated it at 3.16. And
The
the,
pie.
the pi, yeah.
Mm,
When you look at the pi, and when you are studying the pi at school, they will tell you that pi was created by a man called the pi.
mm,
What's together?
mm,
And always as we are listening to these stories, they did not make sense.
mm,
Sanyam Saji Adiwa Atyo, of Guru Atyo, they had their own stories.
they don't know about this history. They don't know the real background history about mathematics, because we are puppets of this education system in Africa. Which again,
Mm,
too
mm,
many, even when someone doesn't know much about that history,
mm,
he will refer to Bazongo.
mm. Kituufu.
Mm-hmm.
Ntambula.
You get.
Mazeewo ono.
Mm-hmm.
So, we know that astronomy, several Asian African cultures birth discoveries in astronomy. Many of these are foundations on which we still rely, and some were so advanced that their mode of discovery still cannot be used now. Egyptians shattered the moving targets of astronomy by discovering We apologize for that little inconvenience. Somebody remember. So like I was now that we usually had a way, like I was telling you, the months. You see, in Africa, there is a reason why we used to we used to name things according to the scenarios that would happen in that specific time. You see things that occur during that duration, and that's how we would, you know, uh, of course, measure time. It was important for the Africans because, of course, they divide. Of course, we say several Asian African cultures birthed or discovered astronomy. Many of these are foundations in which we still rely, and some were so advanced that they are more, of course.
Bisimut.
mm,
Yeah.
Scrolling.
Yeah.
So the funniest so people still use that. The funniest thing of it all is that Africans discovered clocks and how to use clocks. And of course, you know that they did of course these clocks were made with moving water and sand, like clocks were used. A structure known as the African Stonehenge in the present day Kenya was a remarkably accurate calendar. The Dagon people of Mali amassed a wealth of detailed astronomical observation. Many of their discoveries were so advanced that some modern scholars credited their discoveries instead of space aliens or unknown European travelers. So it is funny that we created what they call a clock, and yet Bazunguzi think that for them they understand the time more than the Africans. Jango yogera boy. Nagenda kusakira ngoyo. So Africans had a lot of findings that have been known throughout history. We know that many advanced metallurgy and tool making were made across the, the entirely of Asian Africa. Now, this included steam engines, metal chisels and saws, copper and iron tools and weapons, nails, glue, carbon, steel and bronze weapons, and art. Now, advances in Tanzania, Rwanda, and Uganda between 1,500 and 2,000 years ago supposed those of Europeans. I mean, were astonishing to Europeans when they learned of them. Now, ancient Tanzanians, furnaces could reach, um, furnaces could reach like 1,800 degrees Celsius, 200 to 400 degrees Celsius warmer than those of the Romans. And of course, that is when we are looking at the steam engines. So, Africans, we already had these things that people are making now. Eh? Ngomenya. What is that? So how much is that going to cost? Why? What is that? Mutwalo? Sorry? Okay. So we also that Asian Africans also involved. Were involved in architecture and engineering. Various past African societies created sophisticated built environments or courses. Sorry, they created sophisticated built environments. Of course, there are the engineering feats of the Egyptians, the bafflingly raised obelisks, and the more than 80 pyramids. The largest of the pyramids covers 13 acres and is made of 2.25 million blocks of stone. Later in the 12th century, and much further south, there were hundreds of great cities in Zimbabwe and Mozambique. Their massive stone complexes were the hubs of cities. One included the 250-meter long, 15,000 ton carved granite wall. The cities featured huge castle like compounds with numerous rooms for specific tasks, such as ironsmithing. In the 13th century, the Empire of Mali boasted impressive cities, including Timbuktu, with grand palaces, mosques, and universities. We had all this. Africa was doing all that. We saw that in Mali, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda. Of course, when people are standing out and doing things astonishingly, more especially, um, you know, uh, things that exhibited Africa's independence of the mind. Abu Yokoraji. Huh? You're paying bills? So, looking at the engineering and other stuffs, let us also look at the medicine part of Africa. Innocent stop. Oh my God, would you all over the place? Anyway, uh, we have looked at the engineering, we have looked at all the stuff. But this time, let's look at medicine. I'm cold. I was washed by the rain. I don't think Nedakwa being a fever. So many treatments we use today were employed by several Asian people throughout Africa. Before the European invasion of Africa, medicine is in what is now Egypt, Nigeria, South Africa, uh, to name just a few places, was more advanced than medicine in Europe. Some of these practices were the use of plants with the salicylic acid for pain, as an aspirin, choline for diarrhea, as as in cowpectate, and extracts that were confirmed in the 20th century to kill a gram-positive bacteria. Other plants used had anti-cancer properties, caused abortion and treated malaria, and these have been shown to be effective throughout Africa's or the medicine, um, history. Katoyinza otya okundeka awo ne weebaka? Jangu osome ku navigation. Tewali aliwo. Jangu. Jangu abuuyi. Jangu. So njagala gye oyogere wano nno ku navigation. Kangenda nyampa omunyampi ono kati. Ompita.
Alright. Tewali bye ngenda kuyita kuba okimanyi oli mu kkola. So, ye mouse erinka. Okay. So most of us learn about that Europeans were the first to sail to the Americans. However, several lines of evidence suggest that the ancient Africans sailed South America and Asia hundreds of years before Europeans. Thousands of miles of waterways across Africa were traded routes. Many ancient societies in Africa built a variety of many cabins and a variety of many boats, including small reed-based vessels, sailboats, and rudder structures with many cabins, and even cooking facilities. The Mali and Songhai built boats a thousand, 100 feet long and 13 feet wide that could carry up to 80 tons. Current in the Atlantic Ocean flow from this part of the West Africa to South America. Genetic evidence from plants and descriptions of art from societies inhabiting South America at the time suggest small numbers of West Africans sailed to the east coast of South America and remained there even up to now. Contemporary scientists have actually reconstructed these ancient vessels and their fishing gear and have completed the transatlantic voyage successfully around the same time as they were sailing to South America. The 13th century, these ancient peoples also sailed to China and back, carrying elephants as cargo. People of African descent come from ancient, rich, and elaborate cultures that be more studied in the area, and more people will know these great achievements that Africans did. Ompa biggwayo. So very many Africans they don't know how Africans used to trade. When we talk about the Portuguese freights, the Portuguese the people that sailed along the coast, the people that sailed around waters and across the world, but they don't talk about African achievements that were done before any Muzungos in Africa. Africans were trading. Africans were doing a lot in trade in China and wherever. But very many people won't tell you about this because it is not written in books. Neither is it neither is it taught in African schools because because of the Bavzungus who want to put influence everywhere in African over African history. We know that the pre-colonial presence um, we know that the pre-colonial presence of the Africans in what is called the New World has long been a subject of speculation. Any honest examination of the old and the new evidence relating to the subject will put all the speculations to rest. While this pay deals, so we should know that um, we started in 1990 with a public bana mbyononye mbyononye mbyono njigadde. Um, I don't know why Bazungus don't accept that. Of course, civilization started from Africa. Why they hide new African scholars to learn about these things? Why they talk ill about Africans' achievement in the modern era, in the old era, because it is very difficult to learn about what really happened in African societies before, because it is not written by UNESCO or um, any other authorized international authorized groups of scholars that bring out the evidence about African civilization. Mm. Nawe omanyi kanjiggale eh? Yangu nno tukole nze obwongo bwesibye. African and the creation. So Africa, we should all know that as Africa as the source of our common ancestry actually before, but in 1974 we know that um, throughout the 21 pairings of works from different African cultures and eras, this exhibition provides a rare opportunity to appreciate the extraordinary creativity of the content across 5 millennia, revealing unexpected parallels and contrasts. Although there was no contact between the creators, um, the workers share deep and underrecognized histories. The African origin of civilization will remain on view, while the Met galleries of sub-Saharan African art are closed for the complete renovation of the Michael C. Rockefeller Wing. The re-envisioned wing is expected to banaye 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 ate ennaku webali abantu mwenda.
Impossible. Impossible mwenda bakola ki? Namusalira.
Obalaba?
Kola ntya mama?
Obalaba?
Otudde kuliniza kutukumbula.
But that guy used to produce music, but nowadays,
Nvunvu ekyagala bulikya nga gunjagala. Lwenkikwatulire.
sina wansobola kati nabubwire. So ebintu by'ekiro bino ebyokukola ekiro tubyaweewako ozibagira emisana naye ebintu by'ekiro bino
Nze tuno tukole nga bukyali. Bwe tuva wano eno ngenda kulonda enwenzeko mu bibaafu ebinene. Njiwemu omo. Amasaati ngenda gaawula. Nabo njiwemu. Kibera. Separating. Kumakya n'olugya ngenda okukeera okukola. Oziwerera essaawa 4.
Nkubisa.
Omala ongobe omubiri.
Nkubisa.
Omala ongobemu.
Kinkuta kyalinga. Oba tukomewo mwana tukole 1 hour.
Tetusaakudda. Zirina kuwera ssaawa 4.
Wakolanga n'omusanvu n'omukaaga ate nno nga tosumagira.
Kyekyantuukako. Nedda kukoowa.
Kuba kibite wakoowanga. Tuli tewakoowa.
Eri ne tudda.
Ate ne tukola ate n'otasumagira. Oli just relaxed. Oli comfortable. Oli just comfortable. Just comfortable.
Oba tukuta nnyo.
Just comfortable. Mbadde sumaze okusumagira. Just comfortable.
Gatoli mu kusumagira.
Sinasumagira na.
Kati yogera.
Endo bwangu bange buli freezed.
Tukite. Tuzikize ettaala ekirungi tewali n'alimu.
Ekyo kikola.
Kale tubeerewo.
Kuba bulungi akaddewo osayininga ento ezisaawa ze wakoze. Okitegeeza.
Kirabika bubi. Kiba kirabika bubi.
Ate kiri kye kisinga okulabika obubi kuba yakitegedde nti kazannya.
Tanakitegeera.
Tanabakitegeera.
Ate beabeerire babyogera. Bo babikola. Naye bo kasita balala babikola bweppa. Ng'olwo lutabe.
Ekitegedde nti.
Tulindinge tukomewo.
Sagenda kwebaka.
What are you? What are you anyway, guys?
Ate nayagala tukolere eri mu kitebe ki. Tukitumye.
Kiyitewa.
Oye tugiteeka olinanga gundi leso nzirugavu. Tubika ebirabika. Ebirabika emmese ebirabika.
Tulina okuteekawo kintu kya black. Tugenda kukozesa 2. Leero nga tusooka tunyumyamu nga butuguma. Tujja kifa bakula.
Saagala nnyo kunnyumya.
Tukole tutya?
Yatuwa sente ze naye wadde tuzikolera naye masagala ate tuli watch the result what we do something that goes.
Naye bwe kimumala takuwanguka sente z'otakoleredde. Ekyo tukirowoozanga nako n'olunaku n'oyo omusajja
eza birthday nazikolerera.
Eza birthday kati omuntu bw'agwa birthday bw'omukoleredde.
Kati kyekyokoga mukitegeeza asobola okuwaza otakoleredde. Don't think like that.
Ate kati nze mbadde naye. Ate bayibe nkubuulire. Nze lumungi kati nemala nfuna olubuto mmuleka. Nenkuleka n'omukolero ojja tegeera.
ate
oyo omusajja tewali bw'olitegeera nti abo abantu baline mu kakadde k'omusaala ojja kutya ate nga buli omu takolangako n'essaawa ne ziwera ezo
naye nga
ssatu.
akabawo.
Labano kati nkugambye ajja ali mu kujja kubagulira mmotoka. Oyinza okusaba ekintu kati ate alina olugambo agenda n'abagamba nti bali ngenda bakolera kino ne bateekawo embeera. Kati tolina kyomanyi lwabanzi saako enkya n'enjogera ebyo ne mbibeerako.
Kale no galasho wagambye nti tukomawo ng'olina okudda.
Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching and supporting Black Hot Fire Network. It has been me, Africa Maria, with my colleague INNOSETU. We are coming back yet on another segment here on the Hot Fire Network. Looking forward to having you guys throughout the day. Have a blessed day. Good.